got to brave the weather through all of the storms. We've got to come together.
It's AFA Today, live from New York, and I look outside our studio windows on Fifth Avenue, and you can see that the pre-holiday traffic still building here in the New York area. Kevin McCullough, glad to be with you. Thank you for being here each weekday. Yesterday, many of us awoke to hear some news that was a little bit muddled. It wasn't really clear what had happened, but as the Washington Post and others began to report on it, here's what we learned. Iran and 6 major powers agreed early on Sunday on a historic deal that freezes key parts of Iran's nuclear program in exchange for temporary relief of some economic sanctions. The agreement, sealed at 3 a.m. signing ceremony in Geneva's Palace of Nations, requires Iran to halt or scale back parts of its nuclear infrastructure, the first such pause in more than a decade. Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif hailed the deal, which was reached after 4 days of hard bargaining, including an 11th-hour intervention by Secretary of State John Kerry and foreign ministers from Europe, Russia, and China. But when you dig into the details of this arrangement, writes Jazz Shaw over at hotair.com, he says there's a lot of frosting and not much cake. First of all, this is not a permanent agreement in any way, shape, or form. It's a 6-month arrangement which Iran could simply walk away from at the end, or at any point, really, after receiving a massive fiscal injection in the form of sanction relief. It's also simply a suspension of certain enrichment activities, no dismantling of any of Iran's facilities. The entire show can be started back up at any time. There's additional transparency with more inspectors allowed into additional facilities, which is good, but much like the suspension of enrichment in the past, the deal, this can be terminated any moment Iran decides to not honor the deal. The deal also allegedly limits the level of uranium enrichment that the Iranians can reach, but that's in the same bone we've been chewing on for years. And finally, we have the Iranians on every cable channel doing an in-zone dance saying formal recognition of their right to enrich uranium, while Kerry and his team are saying the opposite. It's hard to imagine how solid any deal can be when the two sides are announcing essentially 180-degree opposite conclusions based on terminology. I agree with everything that Jazz wrote. What you have here is let me give you the specifics. According to the Washington Free Beacon, the U.S. today released $8 billion in frozen assets to Iran in a move that is meant to ensure Tehran's compliance with a nuclear pact signed over the weekend. This, according to top Iranian officials. Iranian government spokesman Mohammad Bakr Nobakht confirmed on Monday morning that the U.S. government had unfrozen $8 billion in assets that had previously been blocked by the Obama administration. All right, so we just gave them $8 billion back, and we said, we're going to take your word for it that you'll stop producing enriched uranium for a period of time. Is this naivete? Is it a willful turning his back on the best interest of Israel and America by the president and the administration? Is it simple naivete? Is it Iran won't do anything bad? We can trust them. They're really good people. Or does it fall into that uncomfortable pattern that I mentioned a little bit earlier, that the president has betrayed again and again those that depend upon him? His ambassador in Libya, his ally Israel, and his own citizen, Pastor Saeed Abedini. This pattern of betrayal to me is even more worrisome than the $8 billion of released financial incentive to Iran. Why did we wake up yesterday and say, let's give Iran $8 billion? Why? What motivated that? What possible good does that present to the U.S. or to Israel's future? What does anybody believe they'll live up to it now that they've had the $8 billion given to them? Would you live up to it if you were in Iran's shoes and you'd just been given $8 billion? Would you find any need to keep the deal? Would there be any incentive on your part not to go ahead with your maniacal radical Islamic desire to blow up and annihilate Israel and the United States? Would there be any incentive not to do that? 888-340, I'm sorry, 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840. Let's see what you have to say about it. Let's start with Jim in Ohio. Hi, Jim. You're on with Calvin McCullough. Glad you're with us. Jim in Ohio, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
You're on the air. Go right ahead.
Yeah, Kevin. I guess the Bible says you'll know them by their fruits, and obviously over the last 5 years, this president has demonstrated he's got his own agenda. He is not. I don't believe that his interest lies in preserving our constitutional form of government. Am I allowed to recommend a book on the air?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, Erwin Lutzer, the senior pastor of Moody Church in Chicago, came out.
I know
with a
him
book
well.
this year.
Good friend. Yeah.
Called The Cross in the Shadow of the Crescent. I would recommend that anybody that's interested in where this country is going from a religious/political perspective, that's an outstanding book to open your eyes about Islam and just the way that it's very subtly and not so subtly anymore infiltrating our country. I'm a retired military, but also I spent 35 years in private business as a technology recruiter for a major bank in Ohio. And I will say this, if our technology department could not come up with a website in 3.5 years, we would be out of business. I mean, to me, you have to have a strong foundation from an infrastructure perspective. That's not been done, obviously. I just think it's part of his plan. And I'm going to be different than maybe a lot of people. I truly believe that in his heart, he's Muslim. And he supports the Muslim Brotherhood. He's turned his back on Israel. I mean, that's obvious, just the way he's treated them the last few years. And he made a token telephone call, from what I understand, the other day to Benjamin Netanyahu, and I can imagine what that was like. But, I think it's just part of the plan. And to me, it's exciting as a Christian. On the other side, I'm going to step above it and see biblical prophecy being borne out in our lifetime. But I would just encourage Americans, those that care about this country and those that are believers, we need to be on our knees before the Lord. We need to uphold and support those that are truly for this country, our constitutional form of government. And the fact that he turned his back on Pastor Saeed, that just speaks of who the man is.
And by the way, Jim, thank you for the call. Good stuff all the way around. By the way, he turned his back on him after promising the family that he would make the formal request to have Saeed Abedini released as part of the conjunction of this negotiation. And according to people who were in the meetings, it was not brought up. He mentioned it to them in September, and what happened in response to his mentioning it to them in September, he was transferred to a worse prison. He was given worse treatment. And I would have thought at that point in time, it's one thing if you insult me, all right? You say that I'm no good for whatever reason, that's going to annoy me to a certain degree. But you come after my family, you come after people that I'm responsible for the protection of, Papa Bear changes dramatically at that point. Because what may be water off a duck if it's about me, if you come after my kids, my bride, my family, suddenly we got a problem on our hands. And so he goes and says, look, this man is a citizen of the United States. He's broken no laws. We think it would be a good idea if you released him in September. And they take him out of the rat hole that he was in, and they put him in a worse place. And he endured more torture and no access to doctors or to medical care. And upon the pledge of, yes, in these negotiations, we will see to it that Pastor Abedini, that his release is secured, doesn't even bring it up, doesn't even go there, just lets him rot. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. The president betrayed his ambassador in Benghazi, knew that they were asking for help, did not send help. Help was within an appropriate distance away. Abandoned our ally, Israel, in this deal with Iran, giving Iran $8 billion, requiring nothing of them that's measurable. Oh, we're going to let inspectors in. Okay. Because the inspectors have worked so far in shutting down all the other research they've done. A very bad deal for Israel. A very bad deal for the United States. And then he abandoned one of his own citizens. He abandoned his staff, his allies, and his citizens. 888-589-8840. Your thoughts on this? Let's talk to Kenny in Oklahoma. Kenny, you're up next with Kevin McCullough. Glad you're here. Hi.
Hello, Kevin. Good to speak to you again, Kevin. You are so correct. Obama has betrayed America. He has betrayed Israel. He's obviously helping Iran by giving them $8 billion. So when Israel does make the choice, or when they have to hit Iran, so is Obama going to support Iran behind the scenes when that does happen? When Israel does attack Iran for self-preservation, is Obama going to be funneling them money and arms behind the scenes? I would not be shocked. Obama is so corrupt and he is so evil. I mean, he and Jerry Brown, the governor of California, the reprobate minds. I know the Bible tells us to pray for our leaders, but does it do any good to pray for reprobate minds like Obama and Jerry Brown?
Well, I think you pray for them in a number of ways, Kenny, and one of the ways you pray for them is that they would come to an understanding of the truth. So, yeah, you should pray for them. There's no question there. But I do understand what you're saying. Let's go to Richard in Arkansas. Richard, welcome. You're on with Kevin McCullough. Glad you're here.
Yes, I'd just like to pose a thought on our illustrious leader, and that is that he shows all the classic examples of an antichrist, not the, but a. And that everything he says, every time he opens his mouth, it is always suspect. And more often than not, it's a bold-faced lie. And everything he does is against whatever is good and wholesome in this nation. He makes no attempt to hide the fact that he does not care for this nation at all. And he makes every attempt to show that he is total support of the Muslims and their plans and the other evil things that are in place in this nation to bring it to its knees. So, you know, he shows me that in every way he exemplifies what the Antichrist will be like. And he's doing everything in his power to make sure he gets his position. Maybe he's trying to secure his own position in that regime should it occur.
Well, I would hope that is not the case, Richard, but I've hoped a lot of things weren't the case. I used to be very anti-conspiratorial. Like, you know, people would come to me with one of these conspiracies. I'd be like, no, you gotta. I don't get as. I don't shoot them down as fast anymore. And it's partly because of just the whole year we've had of just unabashed lying to the American people, deceiving the American people, tricking the American people, listening, tapping the American people, treating them differently behind the scenes. I don't know. 888-589-8840. But he, in these three specific instances, and I don't think it can be argued otherwise, he betrayed his ambassador. He betrayed his ally in Israel with this deal with Iran. And in that same deal, he betrayed a citizen whose family he had given assurances to that this will happen. We will get your husband home. 888-589-8840. Does continual betrayal in this way say anything to you? 888-589-8840. Let's go to Missouri, and that's where we find David. Hi, David. Kevin McCullough, glad to have you with us.
Thank you, Kevin. Good show.
Thank you.
We are in the midst of another game of useful idiots that many will become useless idiots soon. And it always happens as a precursor to war. Iran has not attacked another nation in 210 years. Mr. Obama, he is deceitful, and he has many useful idiots. And the scheme is large. He he's his anti-war left support system would not allow him, and many Christians too, would not allow him to legislate war in Syria. But the road to Iran is through Syria. So he was stopped there. So what I believe he's doing is he's trying to provoke Israel to attack Iran. And so Israel, in a way, becomes Obama's useful idiot. Now, when that happens, you will see the Christian right and those that are like a type of neocon in the Christian right just yell for Obama to go and support Israel against the evil Iran. I believe Christians really need to understand the dynamics here. So, like spiritually, they're right with God, and they understand these men are deceitful. Saudi Arabia is in on this play. Russia's in on this play.
So you don't think Israel has a right to defend herself?
No, I believe it does.
All right.
But the way it's being done is criminal. You know, like when George Bush went into...
All right, David, you're way off into the weeds on a lot of stuff that nobody understands. But long story short, you think Israel is stupid and will be used by this administration to start a war with Iran, the nation we just gave $8 billion to this morning. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but hey, we're allowed to have our opinions. Kevin McCullough, glad you're with us. It's AFA Today on AFR Talk.